The next example of a monohybrid cross that you can get in a paper is one where there is incomplete dominance. So we're still dealing with the inheritance of one trait, so it's still a monohybrid cross. But the thing that has changed here is the dominance. The first video I did was on complete dominance. This one is now incomplete dominance. So just a reminder, with complete dominance, one allele was completely dominant over the other, which was recessive. So when the individuals were heterozygous, the dominant allele masks the recessive allele. So you only see the dominant allele in the phenotype. Now, incomplete dominance, neither allele is dominant. So not one of the alleles for that one trait is dominant. So what we see in the heterozygous state is a third intermediate phenotype. And you must use those words. So it's a third phenotype. So instead of just being red and white flowers as being the only options, now if you had a red and white flower mating, they would produce pink flowers. So it's a third phenotype, still only with two allele options, or genetic options. That third phenotype also is intermediate to the other two phenotypes, meaning it's in the middle of the other two. So red and white, if you mix the two colors together, they make pink. So it will always be in the middle. So if we look at this question, a woman who has curly hair and a man with straight hair produce a child with wavy hair. So if we were to draw that, it'll be very, very curly hair, very, very curly hair, straight hair, and then wavy hair, which will be somewhere in the middle as the third intermediate phenotype. So we know that this is an example of incomplete dominance because there's curly hair, one type of phenotype, straight hair, a second phenotype, and wavy hair, a third phenotype. But that wavy hair is intermediate, meaning it's in the middle, somewhere between curly hair and straight hair. So the trick with an incomplete dominance cross is now assigning the letters. With complete dominance, let's say it was red flowers and white flowers. Red was completely dominant over white. So you use the letter R for the dominant allele, and then you use an uppercase and a lowercase. Uppercase for dominant allele, lowercase for recessive allele. But here, neither of the alleles are dominant, so we cannot use the same letter. So instead, we use a C for curly hair and an S for straight hair. Wavy hair is the intermediate characteristic, so it'll be a combination of the C and the S. So that would be our key. So if someone has the C alleles, remember we always have two alleles in a genotype, they will have curly hair. If they have the two S's, they will have straight hair. If they have a combination, they will now have wavy hair. But let's dive into the cross. So the phenotype of the parents, we read straight from the question. The woman has curly hair, the man has straight hair. So we write that as our phenotype. Curly hair, having a baby. Remember that X shows mating, having a baby with someone who has straight hair. Then you now need to do the genotype, which is the challenging part of an incomplete dominance question. If someone has curly hair, they're going to have two alleles for curly hair. If they have straight hair, they're going to have two alleles for straight hair. As soon as they are heterozygous, so if they had a C and an S, they would not have curly hair in the phenotype and they would not have straight hair. Because it is incomplete dominance, they would have the third intermediate phenotype, which would be wavy hair according to the question. So therefore, the genotype for curly hair has two capital C's. We use capitals still for these questions. And the genotype for straight hair would have two capital S's. Then meiosis happens, and the person with curly hair can only give a C, an allele for curly hair to their children, and the person with straight hair can only give an allele for straight hair to their children. So that's a nice easy one for the gametes. You have curly hair in the gametes and straight hair in the gametes. Now for fertilization, I go to my Punnett square. The mother's gametes go on the top, and the father we can put on the side. And when we show the mating, the parents both give a curly head or a straight head allele to all of the children. So the F1 genotype is going to consist of all the individuals having a CS. Please remember the genotype always has two letters in it for each trait, because the gene that codes for those traits are going to be found on homologous chromosomes. So one chromosome will have a C from the mother, and the other chromosome will have an S allele for straight hair from the father. So all of the children end up having CS allele combinations for the genotype. Now, this is where it is key that you know that it is incomplete dominance, because what CS looks like in incomplete dominance, a combination of alleles, is going to be all of the children having the third intermediate phenotype, which is wavy hair. So it's just about translating the genotype you're given into a third intermediate phenotype, which will always be given to you in the question. They will say what the third intermediate phenotype is. You just need to identify that as being incomplete dominance. So we have answered our first question about using a genetic cross to show the above crossing. So curly-haired mother, straight-haired father, baby with wavy hair. We have proven that that is possible. The second part of the question, explain why the child has wavy hair. This is where your knowledge of incomplete dominance comes in. So you would say that this is an example of incomplete dominance. And how do you know it's incomplete? Because when you cross the two characteristics, you end up seeing a third intermediate phenotype in the heterozygous state. So you have to use those words. So you would say it is incomplete dominance because a third intermediate phenotype is seen in the heterozygous state. And that third intermediate phenotype, you can explain that wavy hair is the third phenotype between curly and straight hair. So it is somewhere in the middle.